Level podcast. Your Masonic podcast. Join the hosts Billy McIntyre and Sam Earl Sedgey as they delve into the world of Freemasonry.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, fans around the world, to yet another episode of On the Level podcast, our 17th, or maybe our 18th, maybe our 19th episode. We've got a lot of recordings in the boat here, and I am with the illustrious brother, worshipful brother, Billy McIntyre. How are you, Billy?
I'm wonderful, Sam. It's been a busy week.
It's been a
By the time you hear this, we've both been running wild with Blue Lodge. So why don't you go first, and I'll tell you what I've had going.
Right. So we just had a Christmas dinner, which was awesome, and we had a turnout of 24 people in a weather storm as well. It was snowing and hailing on the Thursday, and now I've got about 12 inches of snow. So despite the weather, we had a massive turnout of 24. We had one brother, worshipful brother in Vegas who wishes he was there, but he was in Vegas on business for a conference. So we would have been on 26 with his +1. If we had everyone who could have made it, would have been on 35, 36 people plus. But with weather, Christmas, gathering of people in basically when there was a snowstorm as well, pretty difficult. And so the people did turn up, had a wonderful time, had a wonderful meal. I was able to give a little speech, and apparently they were very impressed because my speech was very short. And I gave a little poem. I gave a paragraph from the Tyler's Toast, just a small part, because I usually like doing the entire Tyler's Toast when they're all Master Masons, and if they're not, I give a very abbreviated version of it, which doesn't go through it all and just takes bits and pieces of it. So the non-Masons don't get the full Tyler's Toast ritual, which is a ritual toast, and it's already on the internet, so you guys can read it all anyway. It doesn't matter, but it's a sacred thing that's been done in England with Master Masons only. And when we go on festive boards, which we did in Franklin-Nicole Awards, actually, it was Master Masons only, and it's usually in a private place, and like all the waiters and stuff like that, when we're doing it, are not in the room. So it's a very special toast for Master Masons, and it's something that Master Masons would understand. And some of these rituals are kept special for Master Masons and for the ears of Master Masons only. But a lot of this is available on the internet for people to read and use, and we have nearly a legion of followers on YouTube, which is just insane.
Insane. But, and I'd like to, we both would like to thank you, from our listeners. We've had some of you guys from day one that's come along, and I think that Sam would agree. We've got better as we've gone along. We kind of found our footing. Sam had been doing this before with his other group, and so he already knew what he's doing. I was pretty green, and I'm still kind of green. You can kind of tell. But awesome. we have fun, and we kind of try to keep it real. But thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all, guys hanging around and being there for us, because you subscribing and sharing this with your friends is helping us really grow.
Yeah, I seldom get to check, and it's really funny because Billy PMs me and he says, we're on this many, and I'm like, oh, okay, let me check. I'm like, oh my God, we are. And it's like, it's a real privilege, and I can't say it better than Billy said. It's amazing to have so many subscribers, and we don't really push it that hard. We're very kind of like laid back, and we just want to get the information out and get the facts out and have a good time and introduce a lot of you guys into the fraternal order. And for those who are Master Masons and our brothers, just warming your hearts with a recognition of what you guys do and all the stuff that we do to, bring more light. And so, it's been amazing. Yeah, so we had the Christmas dinner, which was awesome. And I had my stated meeting, which was awesome, which I talked about before. And we got some ringing of the bells. So I'm waiting for a date. I think our our entertainment slash charity committee are looking into that with Charles and the boys and Ryan, Worshipful Master Charles and Worshipful Ryan, with Worshipful Master Tom and Gary and all of them, and George. And I'm waiting to hear from them and to know what day we're going to be going to ring the bells. They asked me if there's any specific date, and I kept it flexible. I said, you'd let me guys know, and I'll as long as you give me 2 days notice. And I think we stand outside these like Target or Pro Bass or whatever, and we ring these bells to raise money for a specific charity. I'm not familiar with the stuff. They know it more, but
Oh, cool.
I'm happy to jump in the cold and do the good work and raise some money for whichever charity we're helping out that particular day and cause. And so that's the next thing that we've got on the bucket list. And then I'm looking hopefully to go to a dinner up in Chicagoland in Medina's thing. It's a dinner dedicated to St. John the Baptist, and it's Master Masons only. So if I can go there, there will be me, Worshipful Brother Charles. I'm hoping another Worshipful Brother as well, and there'll be the three of us going up, having
Charles
a good time.
Robinson.
Charles
correct?
Robinson, Worshipful Brother Charles
Yeah.
Robinson. He goes every year religiously, so I'm like, you know what? He may need some company, so I'll tag along, and I'm trying to get somebody else to come. And if the three of us tag along, it's going to be pretty awesome. So that's really it. I mean, Christmas for me is a time of spending time with family. It's spending time with your immediate family. It's your time of rest, your time of labor from work, from Masonic work. It's that time to refresh and get yourself refreshed for the new year. And I'm a big believer that you shouldn't, personally, I feel you shouldn't be running around doing a lot of, not even just Masonic stuff, but other stuff as well. So for me, it's personally is when it hits the 15th of December, which is tomorrow, I go cold, I go underground. I don't want to be, no emails, no phone calls, nothing. I mean, unless I'm doing On the Level podcast and some other podcasts I do for other various industries, and my music and other stuff like that, I kind of go underground. I don't want to be contacted. I don't want to. I turn into a hermit, and it's good because I get that solace. I get that time with my boy, who's just 7, and I think it's very important in his formative years to get a lot of time with me. One of the things that I regret is not having a lot of time with my father when I was young, because he was constantly busy and working. So I want to write that in a nice in a more productive way with my son and make an effort for that, because sometimes we can forget, where we get so busy into our own worlds. We forget that the most important people around us may need us, and them being our children. So I've got my boy, I got my wife. I got to spend time with my wife.
Yes, absolutely.
And you got to, if you love your wife, you should spend time with your wife. And sometimes,
Well, you should.
And sometimes we also forget that as well. So
Yes, and I was going to say, and I hate to cut in, but
oh, go on.
I was going to say,
Please.
Sam, it's going to go bad for you, because I had a lot of things set up for you with some Masonic podcasts coming up.
I love it. No, bring it.
Next week, I've got some pretty big names set up to record with, and
no, bring
and
it.
Sam so graciously, Sam is the tech guy, and I'm the guy that lassos these people and make them come on the podcast. Most of the time, they're willing. Sometimes I have to drag them in.
Well, you're very humble. You're very humble. I mean, this is the first time listening in. I've got to give credit. This was Billy's vision. He was the man behind this, and I was like, that's interesting, but not really. It was never really my focus, nor a passion. But Billy is so infectious with his Masonic passion and his vision, and just growing Masonry, and he really loves the whole order. I mean, so do I, but he really loves it, and he has a certain insight and eye. And it's just been great, and it's been a privilege. And I've gone along on this ride, and it's been great. It's been amazing. If you told me, like, I don't know, a year ago, I'll be with Worshipful Brother Billy McIntyre, and we will have 16 episodes on YouTube and nearly 1,000 subscribers, which is insane. And all the views that we're getting, and knowing that I listen to a lot of historical podcasts and other podcasts relating on economics and history. May sound boring, but I like that kind of stuff. And they really make a push of in the beginning of the shows as, hey, don't forget to subscribe, press that subscribe button. You know, apparently 50% of you who watch us or 80% of you who watch us don't subscribe, but it's you enjoy our content, and they make a big push on that. And we really don't. So I understand through watching the greats, you know, who are out on YouTube, how difficult it is to get people to subscribe. And I'm one of the, and I'm guilty of it myself, to be honest. I'm one of those guys who hardly subscribe. I'm very paranoid. I'm very paranoid with the internet. It's like if I press the subscribe button, what rubbish would they be sending me and trying to sell to me and whatever. So I'm one of the guys, and then I feel bad asking other people to subscribe because I'm one of those people who don't. So, and even though I religiously listen to various podcasts, and I support them sometimes by like donations. And if I was in England, there's this one historical podcast that I love called the Rest is History. And I just wish if I was in England, and I would be giving them the top donation that they're asking for, and I'd be going to their conferences and just seeing and just absorbing their amazing intellect and wisdom and knowledge on various periods of history that I'm also interested in. They are just geniuses. And so a point being is I kind of understand kind of like what people go through and what they need. So I'm very appreciative of every single one of you guys who've taken the time, the effort, and who are fans of the show and enjoy looking forward to the next show, and have made it part of your monthly life to listen to Billy and I talk. And it's great for Billy for enabling us. Thanks to you and your vision and your leadership for allowing us to.
You know,
I'm not
going to say I did have to drag Sam into this because believe it or not, you know, it's a surprise to us as it is to you. We didn't start this till May of this year of 2025. It seems like we've been doing it for a year at least, if not two. And so, you know, when we started talking about this, and probably, at least when I started, when I got to be Most Illustrious Grand Master in 2024, right, of July.
That's right.
We started talking about doing it, and we're going to do that. Then we kept pushing it off, and I said, hey, we're going to do that, and Sam goes, oh yeah, we'll get to that. And I'm thinking, man, he's pushing me off. I go, Sam, we're going to do that. Yeah, we're going to do it. And finally, I just wore him down. He finally, we're going to do it. And then all of a sudden, people were saying, hey, we like that. And then, man, we took off, and then Sam really likes it too. So see, no, Sam is, you know what? He's a treasure trove, and I'm working on him. This man can do poetry, like man, he's got all this music thing going here. So I'm working on him. He's going to do a poem for when we hit 100 for real, because we got to watch them. They keep these bots keep getting on there and pushing us over 100, and then YouTube throws it back out. So I get excited like a little kid on Christmas, and then it knocks me back down every time I try to get up there. So, but when it gets real 100, we're gonna get something special from Sam.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what we've been doing. Well, let me tell you what I've been doing. I had something special going there too. So, this last week on this last Friday, before, because it's now actually Sunday the 15th of December, so when we're recording. So this Friday before, my brother is a member of Steelville Lodge and Alma Lodge in Steelville, Illinois,
nice.
Which is number 497. And he brought his son in that's 18 now, and he become an entered apprentice.
Wow.
And my father was able to be there, so there was actually, counting my nephew, there was 4 McIntyres there to see that.
Wow.
And so that was pretty special for us, to all be able to be there. My dad's in his 80s, so it was special for him to get to see his grandson come in. I've got some an older son he always says, yeah, I'll do it, but I'm busy, and I got a younger son that's about the same age as him, 18, but he just don't know if he's ready to do it yet or not. And, I think it's more exciting for me than it is for him. Come on, we got to do that. We got to get this done. Yeah. And I guess to me, it's just I realize that I wish I'd have done it when I was 18. I think I just can't. I can't make him understand how wonderful it is. And I wish I could make him understand why it's so special to me. To him as well, I got all this other stuff I want to do. And when you're an 18-year-old boy, I mean, the truth is, the last thing you're thinking about is masonry. You're thinking about, the ladies and the cars, and I was too. So the truth is the truth.
Well, you know what I've learned? I've learned that with my son, there are things that sons tend to emulate their fathers in positive directions if they're positive.
Yeah.
And they tend to emulate their fathers in negative directions if they have a negative experience. That's not always the case, but there is a trend of that. So
yeah,
what's really interesting is I'm a massive avid gamer, and that's one of the industries that I'm very prolific in terms of what I do. And he suddenly, I remember I bought him a handheld thing that had like all these retro games from the 90s, but the screen was too small, so my wife hid it. And so my boy, being my boy, he's smart as hell, somehow found this thing that my wife hid. And weeks ago, and suddenly I catch him in one of the mornings, and he's playing Doom. And Doom was one of the games that I played when I was in my teens. And he had such a good handle on that. Now he's playing a game called Minecraft, which has got the very basic things that really drew me into fantasy, like you having a sword, fighting zombies and monsters, and building your little
it's like Legos
and building your own little empire or whatever. But for me, I'm not interested in that building aspect. The fact that there is that fantasy MMO element, especially when the three of us are now playing, and now he's just started playing this other game called Fantasy Life, which is my wife's favorite fantasy type of game, which is going up levels and fighting monsters and all that kind of stuff. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is that all of this is happening without me kind of like pushing him into that direction. But when he finds his element, I'm able to jump in and support him as much as I can, and give him the encouragement and the enthusiasm that I have for that particular genre. And what I'm saying is that in time, your sons, there will be a time when they will be ready, and when they knock on the door, that's going to be your proudest moment. Yeah. And I've learned from my son is never push him. If he's right, my boy's now into space. I was into space when at his same age, and I never really talked about space to him. It's something that he just jumped on. And now he's an expert on space, for as much as a 7-year-old can be an expert, to be honest. But my point being is one of the biggest privileges there is, and one of the biggest privileges for me, and biggest honor, and something that will melt my heart one day, if I'm alive to see it, I hope, is if my son becomes a master mason. But then again, I would want it to come from his heart. And I would want him. And here's what was really interesting. He asked me, actually, I think it was yesterday, he actually asked me if I'm a Mason. And I said, well, I'm a Freemason, yes. H&M free except a Mason. And he said, I said, well, when can I be a Freemason? I said, well, you got to be an adult of adult age, and you first got to focus on so many other things before you can even contemplate. And I think for 20-year-olds and 18-year-olds, and people who are in that kind of bandwidth, there's so much, they're in their prime, and there's so much that they've got to do in those formative years, those formative adult years, to just get their baseline done. And I remember in my early 20s, I was probably 21 or 22, I was very much interested in Freemasonry. In fact, I'll tell you an anecdote. I was going from Watford to London, I used to work in Watford as I was doing part-time and then full-time work while studying at the same time to pay for my university experience. And I was on the train from Watford going back to London, which is about a 40 minute ride. And behind me, I was sitting on a bunch of seats, and there was another bunch of seats behind me. And there were 4 Masons. I didn't know they were Masons. When they sat down, they're all dressed in these suits. They're looking very nice, sitting down. And they were going to the annual grand sessions of the United Grand Lodge of England. And they were like super excited, and they were just talking. And I was listening. I was eavesdropping I just couldn't help eavesdropping. I say that because it's
trying to pick up some secrets.
As I say, I'm laughing because it just hits some ritual that we do for the opening and closing. Yeah. So I was eavesdropping, like, oh my God, these are Masons, and they were talking about, they're looking forward to. I can't remember the exact conversation now. It was like 20 plus years ago. Yeah. But it got me really, really, really interested. And I really wanted to join. I didn't know too much about it. I knew there were Freemasons. I was aware of Freemasonry in my teens as well, a little bit here and there. But a lot of that stuff was more kind of conspiratorial type of stuff. And, high fantasy type of stuff about the Freemasons and all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to join, and what stopped me was back then, and this is back then when you're on, if you remember, Billy, I think it was about 56 kpbs was the speed, about half an MB speed, I think, back in those days. And went on the internet, and the internet, even then, when you didn't have all the videos and, downloading a video would take forever, or downloading a picture or a piece of art would take like 5 minutes to download.
Or downloading a song.
Download a song would take forever.
Half hour, 45 minutes. Yeah.
Right, back in those days, right? So, but the internet was filled with these conspiracy theories, the New World, the New World Order, and the Illuminati. It was a big thing back then. The Illuminati controls the world, and it was Adam Weishaupt and his crew, and they still control the world. This is before like the Da Vinci Code and all that kind of stuff, and Dan Brown. And so those, when you're young, and then you get into like, the Freemasons are connected to the Knights Templars. And the Knights Templars were heretics, and they worshipped Baphomet, and they spat on the cross, and they peed on the cross, and all this stuff that we've debunked. It doesn't happen. It's all crap. It's all rubbish. I'm a Knights Templar. There's none of that. I can't tell you what happens in the Order of the Temple and all that other stuff. But I can tell you there's nothing remotely even close. It's just complete garbage. But when you're young and you don't want to be involved in all that kind of stuff, and you don't want to, be pushed in a position. And then, there was one thing I read, that another Knights Templar, another Master Mason, was forced to kiss a butt cheek of another. It's all this kind of rubbish. It was just complete rubbish. But it was on the internet, and that stopped me. That stopped me from, the fear of joining, and then fear of being obligated to make oaths and obligations that I would not normally do on my good conscience. And so, and then the repercussions of not doing that. Complete nonsense. And so now, like yourself, I wish I had people around me that were more informative and were able to help me. And I would have probably been a Mason for bloody hell, I'd have been a Mason for nearly 20 plus years. Yeah. And, and that didn't happen. So when I got into Masonry finally, which was a huge privilege, and it was freaking awesome, and one of my biggest highlights in my Masonic life was becoming a Master Mason. That's still a huge. If you said to me, what are the couple of things that were your biggest Masonic highlights? For me, it's being a Master Mason and being a Knights Templar, and the third thing is being Worshipful Master. And what's really weird though is being a Master Mason was huge for me, and I very much look forward to doing that. And being a Knights Templar was, I want to be a Knights Templar. I want to wield a sword and have a squire and wear my suit of armor and, fight in the glory of God and all that kind of stuff. One of the things that I wasn't expecting and had no ambition of whatsoever, because I'm relatively very busy and I've been very busy with everything that I do, was Worshipful Master. And so becoming Worshipful Master wasn't really on my diary, but it just happened because I was, would you like to be, senior deacon? Would you like to be then junior warden? You go to senior warden and then you go to worship. And then, for me now, after being installed and having the privilege to work with all these great past masters and these great brothers of the lodge, and having that responsibility and duty and be able to pass down not only my knowledge and wisdom, but the collective wisdom of the lodge. Those are the three highlights of my Masonic career. I mean, I know, don't get me wrong, I've been on the Grand Lines for like the Cryptic Masons and other stuff.
Yeah.
I've had other honors bestowed upon me in the pending bodies and all that kind of stuff that have been great. But they're great honors to have, but the most prolific ones is being a Master Mason, a Knights Templar, and Worshipful Master of your lodge. And those are the three great things for me.
I think it'd be hard for me to nail down even three. I think what I would have to say that it's just the brotherhood in general. That would have to be what really sucks me in and draws me in, because I'm a people person. I've said this several times during this podcast. Even I've always had friends because I just can get along with people mostly. Yeah, mostly, obviously, we all know that there's some people I can't, but for the most part, I can. And this is just a different breed of people, and you meet people that are just incredible friends. If it wasn't for Masonry, I would have never met Sam. And now, Sam's one of the best friends I've ever had in my life. He'd do anything for me, and I'd do anything for him. And it's just it's a different experience than you'll ever know until you become a Mason. And you can go into a town, and if for some reason you were destitute and you had nothing, you could find somebody and they would give you enough to get you through till you could get home or whatever you need. They would do it just because they're a Mason and you're a Mason. It's just a different world. And it's a different world until you're a Mason. You just don't understand. I don't even know how to say it.
Yeah, you just reminded me. I went to the local Walgreens, my main local Walgreens, to pick up some prescriptions for my wife because, she's had a bit of a rough year, but she's fine. She's good. And I wasn't paying attention, but the gentleman who was serving me through the counter, it's a drive-through counter. At the end, I noticed he had this chain, and on the end of the chain was was a Masonic compass, and with the G in the middle, the square and compass. I was like, huh? I've never seen you around here. I said, what lodge are you from? And he said, Mississippi, I'm from Mississippi, my lodge, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, and he probably just moved in. I'm like, hey, I'm the worshipful master of this lodge, and I'm also a member of the 4 other craft lodges, blue lodges around the area, and hey, just take my number, and if you have time, give me a text, and what you need to do is contact your Grand Lodge in Mississippi, get a certificate from them, and they will contact Illinois, and they will set you up with a couple of lodges around this area. And as you now know me, you're more than welcome to come to visit, but go through the correct procedures first, out of respect to your Grand Lodge and my Grand Lodge. And that's another thing that I want to quickly talk about. So if you are a Master Mason and you want to travel beyond your jurisdiction, always contact your Grand Lodge first. The Grand Lodge will first check if you're a Master Mason in good standing. Usually that means you've paid all your dues for the memberships you've had, and you haven't been, a naughty boy or haven't broken any of the rules, and you're not clandestine or anything like that. And then they'll produce a certificate. And that's really quick and easy. They'll produce a certificate, and they will send you that, and they'll also give you a PDF copy of the certificate, and then you can take that certificate to any other jurisdiction. But most importantly, they will contact that jurisdiction. The Vice Chancellor, we have a fantastic Vice Chancellor in Illinois, and he will contact the relative people and relative bodies in other jurisdictions and connect you, and then they will all put this. There's an entire network of people that will work on your behalf as a master mason to get you into lodges in your area that you're at, which is
right, because it's not impossible for you to visit a lodge if you don't do those things that Sam says, but you're going to have to go through a lot of questioning before you get in that lodge, I'm telling you, and you're going to have to know a lot of things, and then they're going to have to look you up in a book, and then they're going to have to make some phone calls, and it'll just be a lot easier if you do what Sam says. Trust me,
yeah.
because you can show up at the door, but you better have your dues card, and you better have a lot of proof that you are who you say you are, because they're not just going to let you in and go, oh, you got a ring? Well, come on in, because they take that business pretty serious.
They take their business pretty serious. So yeah, so that happened as well, which was really nice, because it was really nice to see a brother, and it was really at the end of the conversation, and I only realized he was when I saw him wearing that chain and that emblem. So
that's awesome.
It was good. But we're here to talk more about the Knights Templars, and we've had a great series of the Knights Templars. We've gone through a few historical periods and parts of Knights Templars to get you guys understanding what life was like, what the order was like. And we've only just touched the surface, and then we went into the myth busting area, which was really important because I wanted to get a lot of the myths out the way, and we actually tackled that, I think, really well for two episodes, and we gave a lot of evidence, and we kind of debunked a lot of the myth and a lot of the falsehoods that a lot of big channels have been pushing because of a few viewpoints that people wanted to push based on their religious points of views, and we've kind of.
Can I say one more thing real quick too? Yeah. And I'm not trying to interrupt with that. If you guys have questions you want Sam to cover, we've linked an email onto our channel. You can just email that directly. We check that often. We don't have comments set up because, as Sam has pointed out before, we have trouble with bots, and it messes up with the comments, and they're putting things on there, and we don't want derogative comments and stuff. That's not what we're about, and we don't want people causing problems with other members and stuff. This is fun, guys, and this is to get members and to just have fellowship. So hit me an email, and I'll be glad to pass that on to Sam, and we'll be glad to read your email, and we'll go from there. Okay.
Yeah, and we don't have time. I mean, another real honesty, we don't have time to manage the comment section. I mean, if this thing becomes huge over the years, we might have someone who checks the comment sections full time. But right. I'm telling you, I don't have any time. And sadly, if I had, if I had more free time and you had free time, we would probably come and engage. But we don't have the time to engage nor manage the comment section, and we don't want to do you guys a disservice. So if we can't do something like that, why do a poor job at it? So if and when we get the comment section up in the future, it's with a time that we can manage it. If it's not me and Billy, somebody else will be managing it on our behalf. But this moment in time, with the massive growth we're having and the massive viewership and the insane amount of subscriptions we're getting, thank you, that it's already a bit overwhelming, to be honest. To be honest, I never expected it to be this big so soon. I thought we would be on at least 150 subscribers or maybe 200 by now with the amount of episodes we've done, and we're close to 1,000, which is insane. So we're very thankful, but we're also, I think, like to think we're a bit humble enough to know that we can't do everything at once, and we're doing this as a labor of love as opposed to anything else, and it's our love for Freemasonry and our brethren around us to increase the light and tell you guys the truth and for you guys to embrace it and hopefully come away with it having good positive thoughts about Freemasonry, because it is a fantastic fraternal order. And so that's my bit on the comment section, and It's just something that I can't personally manage. And Billy, you can't. You're busy. You're busier than me. A lot of times with all the stuff that you do, Masonically, and your full time job. And it's not fair on your family or my family. Yeah. And we're doing this kind of.
I just want to tell them they can send us questions if they want to.
Oh yeah, so, dude, send all the emails you want. Billy will read them.
Yeah, but sorry, Sam. Go back to Templar. I didn't mean to get you off track.
No, not at all. Very, very well said. So we've gone through bits of the histories of the Knights Templar, kind of the setup of the Knights Templars for the Cistercian order, kind of trying to give you the image of what medieval life was and a lot of the proclivities and the way of life and a lot of the reasons, trying to open your eyes and how that, because sometimes it's very difficult for us, let's call ourselves modern men or modern women. It's very difficult for us to understand what life would have been like, let alone 200 years, but several hundred years ago, without having electricity, without having the ability to send a text or have a voice call or a video call with someone around the world, or, be able to press a few buttons on your phone like I'm doing now, dude. I mean, sometimes instead of me spending like 30 minutes in a shop, like I don't know, Best Buy or whatever, trying to find something, I talk to my assistant and I say to my assistant, I say, hey, what's the best thing to buy here, the top thing, and then they'll tell me what the top thing is. And then I'll go on the internet to that store in the area, and I would place the order, and I'll go and I'll just pick it up. Or when I bought my boy a Nintendo Switch 2, because he deserved it, he worked bloody hard this year, and he only gets to play 30 minutes a week anyway. But I went to the computer game place where they sell computer games, console games. I went to a website and I ordered it, but it was to pick up from that store. So I'm supporting the local stores, but instead of going in and faffing around, it's all ready for me to go and just pick up. And I love it. I love stuff like that. And so my point being, though, is that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case back then, let alone 30 or 40 years ago. If I want to, I'm sure there's a bookstore in this country and other countries where I can go, buy that particular book and have it ready for me to pick up. Before when you go to a bookstore, you had to go to the bookstore. You had to go to a section of the bookstore. Then you had to cross your fingers that they had it in that section. If you couldn't find it, then you go to the information desk and say, hey, I can't find it. Do you have it in stock? And then the lady will go check it, and or the man, and then if it wasn't, they will place an order for you. That's all changed. The entire stock is now, you can go online, and that I'm talking about that's between my lifetime. Now we go back several hundred years, and this is all relevant to what I'm about to say. Life was very different. It was a completely alien way of life, and most of us will crumble or just despair of being there, because it was kind of like hell on earth to a lot of respect, and it was a very religious world, and it was very religious because of the way the world was. You had to, your belief and your faith in God is sometimes what just kept you sane, because it was a very, very dark and desperate and rough time. There were no workers' rights. There wasn't any union. There was no minimum wage. There was no freedom of speech per se, and all the rights that we've got or privileges that we've got today. Having a decent meal was only afforded to very few, and most lived a life of absolute destitution and died very early in life. And so I went through quite a bit of that. Now, here's what's really interesting, Billy. Here's what's really interesting. So prior 1307 with the allegations and the arrest of the Knights Templars, we don't know much about the Knights Templars in terms of how many Knights Templars there were, how many other non-Knights of the Knights Templars were there, how many Knights Templar sergeants were there. So there's a lot of things, a lot of records that we don't have. And because what happened is when Philip the Fair went to arrest the Templars and then arrest the Templars throughout all of Europe, we basically they burned a lot of their records. And they left records that were very, very, very mundane. Yeah. So when Philip the Fair arrested the Templars, they destroyed a lot of their records. A lot of the treasure was taken, was disappeared. A lot of the Knights Templars disappeared. So we've lost a lot. The only records we have, Billy, is from the interrogations, from everything that they were able to uncover that was left. And a lot of that was mundane stuff, like how many sheep they had, how many goats they had at local commandery, how much wool they sold in England or the vineyards in France and all that kind of. It was very mundane stuff. So
the Catholic Church didn't have a record of how many Knights Templars there was?
No, well, all the records were kept within the order. It wasn't.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just surprised that the Pope didn't have a better record system than that.
Well, there wasn't an administratum for the churches, but every order was expected to do their own bookkeeping and keep their own records. And even then, you have to then go back and then understand about record keeping back then. There wasn't any data centers. Everything had to be written and affirmed and confirmed. Everything if there was an audit, everything was so manual back then. You're in a realm where labor, as in people, humans were the most important piece of the labor. Nothing was automated. So everything literally had to have a human hand involved for it to get to somewhere. And so all of this stuff, if you were going to do what the bureaucracies do now, it would take an immense amount of manpower, immense amount of education, which didn't exist even then. So it was literally up to the orders to do all that. There wasn't a bureaucratic class to handle all of that to the greatest extent. So all the auditing, all the bookkeeping, all the notes was kept in the Knights Templar order, within the order. And actually, the Knights Templars did excellent bookkeeping and excellent note keeping, because every commandery had a treasurer, which is very funny. Every commandery had some type of someone who acted as a secretary to the preceptor. The preceptor was a high-ranking Templar of that commandery. He was the leader. But the leader didn't do everything, and this is the misconception sometimes historians have. The preceptor was in charge of a team. That team involved, and I'm going to get into this a bit more, other Knights Templars, Knights Templar sergeants, which there are more of than the actual knights, and then the farmers and other people who made the sworn oaths to the organization. So you had the stable boy, you had the cook, you had the farmer, the farmland, the weavers, the guys who would, the blacksmiths and everything like that. And what's interesting, and something that I want to break here and let historians around the world listening in to go and do the work and go and come up with better sources if we can find them, or come up with a more reliable, logical, common sense picture, is because no one has really zeroed in like we have today, that what I'm going to go through. It's actually, for me, this is a big deal. I'm not sure if it's actually a big deal for the world, but for me, it's a big deal because a lot of the historians, great historians, they all kind of agree on there was in the order possibly. Again, these are estimates, and the problem with these estimates is they can be off by quite a bit. So the estimate is, that's kind of agreed, and some people dispute it, is there was about 20,000 members in total for the Knights Templars around Europe, Christendom, and everything like that. Okay. And out of those 20,000 Knights Templars, only 2,000 were knights. Now, some say no, there was only about 1,000 knights at a time. a lot of people, there's an argument that no, there were 2,000 knights at a time. So I was like, well, let's figure this out. Let's get what we can and understand actually what is the best estimate we can, because there is no record prior to 1307, the arrests. And that's because the Order kept all their records. And when Philip the Fair came to arrest them and the rest of Europe, we all know that the Templars got the heads up before in time. They were prepared for it. And they burnt and they destroyed not only centuries worth of records, but also they hid the treasure, and most of them escaped. A lot of them escaped all around Europe. Now, here's the thing. The only records we have who have been captured are those who were captured. And one of the most sacred oaths that you make is to protect your brethren. And Knights Templars were very good at protecting their brethren. And so the reason why they would destroy a lot of the records is if you have nobles who are working with you, priests and bishops, and you have this vast network and connections, the worst thing you can do is give it to your enemy to interrogate more people. So instead of interrogating the 1,000-something that they did interrogate throughout all of Christendom and Europe and in France or whatever it ended up, they didn't investigate the 20,000. So they protected their own, and they protected their contacts. They protected the noble houses that supported them or they supported. So the octopus arms of Philip the Fair and the tyrant and the rest of his lackeys and the rest of those who kind of like got colluded with him or didn't collude with him but continued trying to investigate the Knights Templars over 7 years before Jacques de Molay was killed. I remember, and in 1311, Clement gave them, clemency. He that's no pun intended. He absolved them of the order. He tried to bring the order back in, but Philip the Fair said no and damned them anyway. It took him 2 years later. It took him 3 years to 1314 to kill Jacques de Molay. Even when, I'll get into the 7-year thing because I think that's important. I already made quite a big thing of that in the previous episode. But okay, we've got 20,000 Knights Templars that a lot of people agree with. In terms of military knights, actual knights, there's a dispute of there's only been 1,000 to 2,000. Now, here's the problem with both numbers. Historians are in agreement that there was between 900 and 1,000 commanderies in Europe. I'm not including the ones in the Holy Land before they were lost, okay? And the castles and other places like in Cyprus or whatever. There was 1,000 commanderies. Now, every commandery had one preceptor. And the preceptor was basically the master of that area. He was in charge of recruitment. He was in charge of training. He was in charge of retention of the Knights Templars. A lot of the Templars were recruited from cathedrals, like the Templar sergeants, who weren't of noble birth, young boys or whatever, who were brought in to the order. A lot of nobles were recruited, and they became the knights. A lot of them became the knights. Some of them, even if they were from poor noble houses, they were still nobles. There was roughly, in Europe, around 68 million people, the population of Europe, which is tiny, because 68 million is smaller than the population of England right now. By that time, there was roughly about 68 million. I'm talking about from the 1290s to the 1307. Let's just work that number in. So roughly the estimate we have is 68 million. Out of the 68 million, about 2 million of those, and this is not my numbers, but historians, were from the noble houses. So a tiny percentage of Europe controlled the vast majority through force, through brutality, through noble birth and noble rights. So it's a small number out of the six. It's not even 10%. It's actually 10% of 68 million would be 6.8 million. So 5% would be 3.9 million. So we're talking about 2 million. So we're talking about a small percentage was the nobility. Out of that nobility, we estimate that there's about 200,000 young men from the age of 18 at any given year. Out of that 200,000
Okay.
out of that 200,000 men, it's quite probable to take a small percentage of that and say 2 to 5,000 of them were potentially part of the Templars. Because you have to remember, you are in a religious environment. It is Christendom everywhere. Your outside of your label was church. It was God, farming, sleeping, eating, and giving your blessings and prayers and king and country and all that kind of stuff. There wasn't TV. There wasn't all this kind of other. There wasn't the Colosseums or anything like that. Okay, so it was a very religious affair when you were in the Christian Europe, and there were things that you would do that could get you in trouble. People may think you're into witchcraft. I mean, it was a very strict and stringent time of in that kind of realm. So remember, I said some people say there was exactly 915. Some say there was actually closer to 1,000. Let's just say that 1,000 number, or 915. That means there was 915 preceptors. A preceptor wouldn't work by themselves. That's not how commandery works. The commandery would have a minimum of 3. That means a preceptor and 2 other Knights Templars. Now, in demographics and geographics, where there are bigger populations like cities like London, York, Paris, other places around Europe, other big cities in that particular time, there would be bigger commanderies which would have more knights under the preceptors because of the recruitment population pool. In remote areas, and somewhere in York, far away, where there's 50 villages or maybe 100 villages, let's just say, there might be just one preceptor with 2 knights. In a place where there was 20 people or 50 people, there might be just one preceptor and 1 knight. But when you take all the commanderies, and the commandery could be just a chapel, or it could be something as impressive as Temple in London, or the massive fortress in Paris. And remember, there were more than 2 cities in Europe. It wasn't just London and Paris. There were loads of cities, all right? Not as expansive as today, but there was loads of cities. And remember, 915 to 1,000 commanderies.
Yeah, and wouldn't there be so many knights on the ships too, because they were big in sailing too,
Well,
right?
this is just it. If we just go to 1290, okay?
Yeah.
Which is 17 years before the arrest. So
Right.
So the arrests were 1307. 1290 was just a year before they lost Acre, and they lost the Holy Land completely. Okay, so this is all very, very recent. In Acre, there was about, what historians agree to, about 500 Templar. They were the front line. They had 500 Knights Templars, and there was 2,000 Templar sergeants. All right, so listen to this. Roughly 2,000 Templar sergeants. In Cyprus, which was kind of like their midway point, refueling station, where they would refuel. When I say refuel, is when they will be able to transport more bodies, more military arms, more soldiers of the order. There was about 200 to 300 Templars and about another 1,000 Templar sergeants. So, in totality in that region, including another castle that they had, a fortress there around the Holy Land, there was about 800 military active Knight Templar soldiers and about 3,000 Templar sergeants, okay, just from that order. Now, that's quite a force, right? So you're talking about just under 4,000 Templars. Sergeants, that's not including 3,000. They had also had 3,000, I can't remember what they called them, but there was another military auxiliary unit they had, and they had 3,000 of them, and they're usually bowmans and all that kind of stuff. So if you add that to that number, I think they call them troubadours or something like that, but don't quote me. I'll get back to my notes in my next episode and come back and tell you what it is. But they had 3,000 of them. And so suddenly you're on 6,000, 7,000 men. And that's not including the mercenaries they hired as well. So suddenly we've jumped in the Holy Land close to 10,000 Templar military operation. Now, how do you sustain that operation, right? How do you sustain those numbers? just with the Knights Templars, just with the Templar Sergeants, right? You got to have a recruitment ground.
Yeah.
And the recruitment grounds were the commanderies.
Right.
Or the retainment grounds. Now there is an argument like, no, it was the cathedrals that recruited the Knights Templars. It was the churches and all that kind of stuff. But still, the commandery was the retention ground. It was a place where before you would go to the Holy Land, you were trained in the arts and the crafts. You were trained also into how to be self-sustained. And there is a rule as well. There's a rule that there's always needs to be two brothers, whether it's going to battle or to travel and all that kind of stuff. It's in one of the codexes. And so some people have forgotten that, and sometimes you can look at it so analytically that you miss the evidence, that if there were 1,000 commanderies, that means there was 1,000 preceptors, because every chapter or commandery had to have a preceptor to run it. So there was that one knight, basically. And a preceptor in a battle group, when they went to battle, and they would go in battle groups with like 10 knights, the leader of that battle group would be a preceptor. So a minimum of 10 knights would be led by a preceptor. So my point being is that there were commanderies where there were 10 knights, 12 knights, 20 knights, sometimes 30 knights or 50 knights. There were preceptories on the fringes of the countries of Europe where populations were sparse, and you had maybe 3 knights and a preceptor if it was a small commandery with very little land and very little to do and all that kind of stuff. But even the very little to do stuff, because people kind of like think in modern day terms like, oh, the preceptor would have signed everything, the preceptor would have gone to the farms and handled all that, and the preceptor would have done all the food. But no, remember I just said everything was very human labor intensive prior automation. So you would have to have someone, the preceptor would have to have someone to delegate a knight to watch the farmland, make sure that the yields are good. If they had also a winery, then a preceptor, a knight would delegate that to somebody else. The marshal of arms, the person who having your equipment, the Knight Templar equipment was very, very important. Maintaining that, a preceptor couldn't do all that by himself. There was like 101 tasks to do. The responsibilities, and remember, we also forget this was a military organization first and foremost. Yes, they had land. Yes, they had vineyards. Yes, they had they constructed the first banks or whatever. But they were a military structure. Everything was structured. Even their hierarchy was a military structure. It was structured in a way to do what? To support and protect those in the Holy Land, to keep the Holy Land within Christendom, and to protect the Holy Land, but also to protect Christendom within Europe as well. They weren't officially a police force, but they were there to keep the peace as well in many instances. So now think about that. Preceptors, that's 1,000 preceptors. If you average out of all the different numbers of different commanderies, that the average number was 3, and that's lowballing it. That means there was 3,000 knights at any given time. That's in Europe. I'm not talking about Acre or Cyprus. We're talking about the commanderies in Europe. So if we have 800 Knights Templars there and a minimum of 3,000, we're now close to 4,000 Knights Templars. That's a massive swing from the 2,000 we think there is, or 1,000. That's like that's nearly 100% swing the other way. So what's really profound is that there were more Templars than we actually, that historians would like to think. And there's a reason why I think a lot of the historians have got it wrong. It's better to lowball something and get the numbers be really low and get it wrong than be really high. It's better to be surprised. It's like anything, even when you're selling a tournament or tickets, it's better to go for 50 and sell out than have 75 places and only sell 55 tickets or 60 tickets. So for a historian's reputation, it's always better to go conservative and lowball the numbers, because if you are off by a lot, your credibility kind of like diminishes. But
Right,
if you were under, like, well, I thought there was more. Oh, this is great. Okay, I was off, but it doesn't really hurt your credibility. It kind of just
Right.
says that you didn't have the information to support there were bigger numbers. But I'm giving you a lot of evidence and backing about how the priories or the commanderies, or whatever you want to call them, or the chapters, or whatever you want to call them, chapters, commanderies, priories, were how many there were. Everyone by Templar Code had to have a preceptor. Those preceptors were in charge of training and retaining and also recruiting. So if there was only one preceptor and that was it, who were they training and recruiting? And in the time where the Holy Land, only the Christendom only had a few bastions left in 1290, let's just say, would be peak time to recruit more people, right?
Yeah.
So and when you lose the Holy Land, which they did, they wouldn't go they wouldn't take their feet off and stop recruiting. They would push for more recruitment, because
Absolutely.
even some of the best historians have admitted that some of Jacques de Malay's plans was to have another crusade in his lifetime with the blessings of the papacy. And to do that, recruitment needs to go on overdrive. So
Yeah, they had to be rallying the troops and telling everybody it's God's will. We have to get the Holy Lands back.
yeah, it was a massive
They
shock.
had to be, they had to be pushing that.
Absolutely. So it's actually more likely, and again, we are still speculating, but we're trying to bring logic and common sense into this and not go with documentation that was done post the arrests. Because you have another problem. Let's say you go to the lowball numbers, really lowball, because, historians want to play it very safe and they don't want their reputations tarnished and they want to be as accurate as possible and go with what they've got and all that. Let's say we go with the lowball numbers, and let's say there was just only 1,000 actual knights and there was maybe like 10,000 in the order or maybe 20,000 in the order. You're telling me with a strength of only 1,000 knights spread across Europe, that it took 7 years for Philip the Fair, who had one of the mightiest armies and was a very powerful man when he had the Pope on his fingers, took him 7 years to damn the Knights Templars. And on the 4th year, Clement kind of gave Philip the Fair 2 fingers and said, no, we're absolving them of their sins. Only to Philip the Fair say, screw it, we're going to kill him. Because Philip knew if Clement allowed them to come back in, which is what Clement did and the Catholic Church did, he would have been screwed. The Templars the Templars and his enemies would have been at his gates, and his line and succession would have been threatened. So he did what any tyrant and despot did, is kill off his enemies. And the Templars weren't to be trifled with. I mean, he tortured the Grand Master and a lot of the higher ups of the Templars, and the Templars who went into hiding would not be so forgiving. So Philip did what any tyrant would do, would kill off the enemy and make sure that they're done, because these weren't just some bunch of hobos. These were military veterans of war, and some of the best Christian warrior killers on the face of the planet at that time. And so why?
And there probably wasn't an army in Europe that could have stood up to him.
Well, here's the thing. Now, numbers being 3,000 Knights Templars, lowballing that, it could have been the average commander was 7. It could. I don't know. I'm speculating. But if the average commander, on average, I'm talking about the average here, the lowest and the highest, was 7. That's close to 7,000 Templars if you take 915 as the number for the commanders around Europe, or if you take 1,000. Now, if you take 915, don't forget, the numbers they had before they left America. They still had Cyprus at that point as well, so they still had a bastion there. So, and then also they had a bastion in Malta as well. So, what my point being is, if they had 3,000, 7,000, or above that 2,000 number where there is kind of an agreement. So we're talking about going from that compromise and going into somewhere that actually makes a bit more sense. If there were 7,000 knights, it's very possible there was about 15 to 20,000 sergeants, because the sergeants in the commandery would outnumber the knights. The sergeants would have leather armor. They were from the flock, peasantry, whatever, merchant class, or people of not noble birth that wanted to give themselves to God, but also wanted to fight in the name of God, but want to be part of the highest, most epic, elite military religious order, which was Knights Templars. And they always outnumbered the Templars. I remember I told you there was 2,000 of them in Acre in 1290, around about that number, and only about 500 knights. And so that's a 4-to-1 ratio, just in Acre, right?
Right.
And in the commanderies, there would normally be about maybe 10, 7, 15, 20 sergeants that did a lot of the other stuff they had to do, like collect money's own and all that kind of stuff, and do other stuff and training and all that kind of stuff. And don't forget, every Knights Templar now, so there's another agreement that every Knights Templar had a squire. So whether there was 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, there was a squire for every Knights Templar. And they're the ones who kind of like basically made sure that the Knights Templar had all their equipment, but they were also able and ready, a lot of them, to fight. And some of them also became Knights Templars as well eventually. So
can I ask another question too?
Go for it.
So, and I'm asking because I think I know, but now didn't a lot of the other religious orders fight with the Templars as well, like the Hospitallers and
the Hospitallers fought with the Templars.
So so when you're messing with them, then you've got those other orders as well.
Now, but here's the thing: things now start to make a lot more sense. Why it took 7 years to damn the Templars, and even after 4 years of torture and false confessions and all that kind of malarkey and all that rubbish, Clement absolved them and tried to reinstate the Knights Templars in 1311. It would make sense that if the Knights Templar military standing, included Templar sergeants and the squires, was around 15 to 20,000, and the membership itself, in terms of the clergy, in terms of the farmers, in terms of just the stable boys, all that kind, was over 100,000 strong. Now we're talking business. Now it's making more sense why it took 7 years, because Templary was part of Europe. It was part of the Christendom. It was integral. They did so much economically. They were the biggest bankers. They said that Philip the Fair owed the Templars enough money to fund 2 crusades. So where was this money coming from? And at the same time, the King Edward I, who was very close to the Templars, owed quite a bit of money, not as much as some people say 500,000 livres or whatever, gold, whatever, with was the Philip the Fair, and other people owed a lot of money. Where was all this money coming from? Well, as I explained, they had a massive internal economy, and a lot of the times the debts were paid in like horses. Edward gave a lot of horses to the Templars, which the Templars needed. Philip the Fair gave a lot of grain. Grain helps feed an army if you own windmills, which they did, and all that kind of. So they had an internal economy, and they were able to barter debts with actual produce and goods and lumber for the shipbuilding that they needed. So suddenly now, them having the greatest navy starts to connect. Suddenly now, them being able to build these massive fortresses that cost an absorbent amount of money makes a lot of sense. Because they had it, and then they're like, oh, but, and the other argument would be, but, an upkeep of a Knight Templar was hundreds of this particular coinage. But yeah, sure. But if you can fund 2 crusades, give a king enough money to fund not one crusade. Remember, one crusade was big enough, and before you start another crusade, you got to finish the first crusade. So if they gave enough money to fund 2 crusades, they had an enormous amount of wealth. And the documentations we have post the arrests were stuff they were not bothered in showing. It's like when you get arrested, and let's say the Nazis come in, and they're coming into them like they did, and they killed 250,000 Masons. Do you think the lodges, if they ever got their heads up, would keep the paperwork of the funds and finances and the entire membership and the family to the Nazi party? Right? No. When Philip the Fair is coming to take you out, and then Philip the Fair, you could say, was the equivalent of the Nazis back then. He kicked the Jews out. Not saying he was, he was a fascist or anything like that, but he kicked the Jews out before the Knights Templars, completely out of Paris, banned them, right? And he treated them like what the Nazis would do. And so my point being is, if they had the heads up, obviously you're going to destroy your records. Obviously you're going to destroy all your financial records. And stuff that doesn't matter, you'll kind of leave, the boring stuff. So
right.
What I'm trying to break today is that it's very suggestive, and it's very likely that we've got our numbers wrong. And it's not because, anyone's done bad work. It's just very difficult to... We're in a unique situation where we're involved in the commanderies of today. And if you do your history, and if you do your digging in United Grand Lodge of England through their library and other libraries in Masonic Grand Lodges, and you also have access to world history from these great historians, and you have access and you can ask the right questions to attain the best answers, and you understand the formations and the structures of Knights Templary, then your eyes open and more of the world that was gets revealed. And a lot of us kind of miss it because some of us, are just interested in the camaraderie and the fellowship. Very few of us actually are interested in the history. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just right. It's just this way we are in our times right now. But to understand that the Templar numbers were a lot larger than we have today, and that you have to caveat this was a labor-intensive society. Everything evolved around humans, and you needed the constant recruitment of bodies to send to the Holy Land. And when they lost the Holy Land, it was even a bigger drive and a bigger purpose to start with training and getting more people in to get ready for a crusade and because when you're going to take over the Holy Land, and if Jacques de Molay, with a lot of top historians say he was planning for that, going to siege a city, going to siege a castle, you're an idiot if you had the same numbers as the guys in the castle, or less than those in the castle. You normally had to have 4-1, 5-1, some argue 10-1 numbers to be successful, because laying out a siege and you being the attacker was an enormous effort, especially with those who were protected on the heavy city walls or heavy castles. So you automatically, and these guys were siege masters as well. So saying that they were on a massive recruitment drive is a no-brainer. And they've been doing this for centuries. So now you have the 1307 accusations coming in. Why did it take 7 years? When you had so many people involved, when you had countless of people, whether you were a massive standing army that Templars had, bulk of them being Knights Templar sergeants, not actual Knights nobility, but the Knights themselves, noble Knights, there wasn't 1,000, it wasn't 2,000. I think it was more. We're talking about, it could be anywhere between 3,000. I think a realistic number would be 7,000, based on the average.
Well, you probably had to wonder if King Philip had to wonder if there could be a rescue attempt at any moment, coming as well.
Well, here's the other thing. Remember, he died a year after,
right? In
a mysterious way.
Yeah.
Also, Clement died as well a year after. And what's even more weird and kind of scary is that his actual direct bloodline died 13 years later for Prince Philip the Fair, and 13 being an ominous number. So what's really interesting about this episode is trying to give you guys an understanding of the power and the force Knights Templar were, and the effect of the tradition, and why such a huge part of, a powerful part of Christendom, this knightly order. Because we forget the Teutonic Knights at some point managed for I think about a century or more later on to have their own kingdom. They had their own part in the Germanic area, which they controlled, and they led. I mean, you imagine a knightly order running their own country. It happened. It happened with a knightly order. They actually enabled to do it. It didn't last for long eventually, but it did happen. So, and the Teutonic, I mean, to do something like that, not only was based on having knights, but the economy, the institution around you, the people around, the numbers you had to have. And the numbers were a key thing back then. You couldn't do it with 50 knights. You can't take over a country with 50 knights, or let alone 500 knights. You've got to have numbers, and numbers was a big thing back then. The reason why the Mongols were nearly indestructible was numbers. The reason why the Islamic forces, the Saladin and the other Sultan force were so big, it was numbers. Numbers counted for something. The reason why Constantinople fell is Mehmet had the numbers, and the Constantinople emperor didn't have the numbers. I mean, there were thinner numbers on the walls. If they had more numbers than they used to have, probably Turkey today would still be Constantinople, would still be a Christian country. So numbers mattered, and to state that the Templars didn't really have the numbers, but they were just so all powerful and had all these commanderies and were the world's bankers and had the greatest fleet, it doesn't add up. Right. Unless you have that labor intensivity, which was not only needed, but was essential. Otherwise, things would not work. And so this is the biggest cover-up we've had. A lot of it because it was suppressed. What happened to Templars? They were basically just plastered as heretics and heresy. And a lot of that, even till the last century, going back, 26 years, was still fabricated. And it's just amazing to be in an era to be able to reveal all this and give you historical facts and then the numbers to back it up and how a structure of a commandery would work and how pointless it would be to just have a preceptor, and a preceptor who is de facto a person of great import having no one to command. So that's why the numbers, that they're professing doesn't, and then they are lowballing it for a deliberate reason because no one wants to be wrong on the high end. But what I'm trying to say is there was a lot of Templars. There was about 3,000 to 7,000. There's more likely the number of actual knights. Templar sergeants, you're looking anywhere between 10 to 15,000. Easy. And now suddenly the Holy Land makes sense. Suddenly all the battles start to make sense. Suddenly being able to hold the Holy Land for nearly 2 centuries start to make sense. And all
I was saying earlier is, I know if they had that many ships because they had such a navy, there had to be the equivalent, maybe not actual called knights, but there had to be the equivalent of some kind of fighting men on those ships.
There you go. I mean, perfect.
They might not be called knights per se, but they had to be some kind of fighting, seafaring men.
You had to have, if you've got the biggest navy in the fleet, you have to have at least, several hundred is lowballing it. You had to have at least several thousand just to man them, put them into sea, and all that kind of stuff. And the problem is that when all the records are kept within the order, and then the order is plagiarized by all this heresy, and they know the enemy's coming after them, destroying the records is the first thing you do. It's the first thing you do is destroy the records to not implicate the rest of the organization. And the idea was, you think about it, Jacques de Malally's plan was to go through these accusations, because they knew it beforehand, was to go through the process, get clemencies, because they were so powerful to a great extent militarily and influentially. Get slapped in the wrist. Remember, 4 years, Clement did exactly that. He did absolve them. We have the Chenon parchments that absolves the Knights Templars, and then the Knights Templars get reinstated, and then everyone moves on forward. So it kind of all makes sense of, hey, disappear the records.
he couldn't have thought anything was going to come out of it, really.
Absolutely.
Because they hadn't done anything wrong.
These were honest, godly men, and even here's the other thing that really upsets me about the fabrications, the lies, the falsehoods about Knights Templar. In 1260, around that time, there was an update in the rules since 1129 of the Knights Templars, and if you read these rules, dude, they are really. I mean, being a Knights Templar was really, really stringent and was really, really strict. I mean, I'll go through real quick, just a couple of them.
Oh, well, I think some of my favorite is you had a pair of the wool underwear, basically, undergarments, that you couldn't take off. You wore them forever once you put them on, right?
Right, so I'll give you an example, some of the rules. I'm going to go, and some of them right now, to be honest, are kind of funny. So, for example, rule number 48. This is the 2.0 edition. This is 60-something rules in addition to the 100+ rules they had. So, no buying relics. Faith isn't a market stall. No charms, rings, or herbs. Superstition is idolatry. Sick brothers get doctors, paid, real ones. No bleeding with leeches. The Templars already knew that bleeding with leeches, all that kind of rubbish, didn't really work. Self-harm is suicide. You're damned. Astrologies. Stars don't guide crusades. God does. Doesn't sound like an ahistoric, Gnostic order of, little green men and pagan gods now. Sorcery. Court, you're banned, same as them. Prayers, 5 times. You got to pray 5 times.
Yeah.
Mass, attend in silence. If you're late, no leeling. Right? They didn't. You forget these were Catholics. They did mass. Confession, once a month, no secret kept. If your sin was public, your penance is, that's number 58 is 2. Humiliation heals. Alms, only given by master's orders. Okay. No hiring mercenaries unless desperate. Use brothers first. No trade with Saracens unless trading for prisoners. No drinking in towns. Rumors spread faster than plagues. No staying overnight away from the house. Beds checked every night. If the master commands the impossible, obey. Miracles do happen. If you fall on your horse, get up. If the master, so we did that one, and so there are lots of these types of down. Here, think about this: what I've just gone through, right? And I said the master. Well, hold on. Why are they suddenly saying the master? So for example, the rule number 26: no personal money. The master keeps the purse. You keep nothing. No gifts accepted unless openly offered. Then hand them straight to the house. No begging, work or starve. That's a very Cistercian thing. No selling goods. All trade goes through officials. Very, very interesting thing. 1 meal a day, bread, fish or veg. No meat unless you're dying. Wine must be watered. Drunkenness earns 3 days on bread and water. No swearing. By God, gets 20 lashes. No nicknames, just brother. No personal identity, no personal money. Master keeps it. So who's the master? Well, the master was the precept. That's really funny. Remember, worshipful master of the preceptory, master of the commandery. There's a lot of words we use that today that they use back in the day. And the master is usually a knight that's elected amongst their brethren. So those are some of the. So another one: knights always ride in pairs, never alone. So there's this. The marshal controls all the weapons. No one touches without permission. The master, if he dies, vote for him. So the master gives orders, no questions. If he dies, listen to this. If the master dies, that's a commandery, like how we do it in our basic lodge. Vote for a new one immediately. He appoints a marshal, a draper, a treasurer. Interesting. Knights always ride in pairs, never alone. So yeah, my point is that for there to be a preceptory, there needs to be more than one Knights Templar running that preceptory, and the master or the preceptor, let's just say. And then on the high level, you had the Grand Master, the Grand Marshal, the Grand Draper, the Grand Treasurer of the entire organization. And remember, this was a military structure. So I just wanted to talk about on this episode how prolific and the great numbers the Knights Templars were. Now, when you go to the Battle of Bannockburn that we touched on, and they said there were 5,000 Scotsmen. Well, if you had a standing army of 20,000 and half of them went to Scotland, or a third of them went to Scotland, that's a lot of Templars, whether they're Templar sergeants or Knights Templars. And remember, what did Robert the Bruce did? He won the Battle of Bannockburn, and he won every other battle. But what did he do whilst winning every other battle? He started to build fortresses around and started protecting his fiefdom. Who were the best builders of these castles? Were the Knights Templars, and it all happened after the disbandment of the Knights Templars, and when Jacques de Molay was burnt to the stake. So this is what's really, now we're bringing things to light. Now you've got a picture of Templary that has been suppressed through the centuries. Now, a lot of this is suggestive, but I'm saying is it's equally as agreeable to say there were 7,000 or 3,000 actual knights than there was lowballing it to 1,000, because that would not make sense, because you already had 1,000 commanderies in Europe prior to 1307, and each one had a preceptor. And if you argue, well, some preceptors went away and did something else. I mean, okay, fair enough, but you still had several hundred preceptors, and none of them, you had at least a minimum of 3 to 7 knights, minimum, and bigger ones were 10 to 20 to 30 knights, sometimes 50 if they're in like a fortification or whatever. So if you average it just to 7, that's 7,000. If you average it to 3, that's 3,000, and that's not including the sergeants. So I just wanted to go through this part. I think this part's really important. Numbers are important. It gives you a better picture of why it took Philip. And remember, it took Philip a couple of years to build a case against the Knights Templars. So this was more than a 10-year process to get rid of the Knights. You think about that, Billy. 10 years in medieval years is huge. It's a massive lifetime.
Especially when most people didn't live, more than 15 years anyway.
Exactly.
So it's almost a person's lifetime.
Nearly almost. So my point being is, even if the average person lived to the age of 35 or 45, 10 years is nearly a third or a quarter of someone's life. It took over 10 years because Philip had to build a case before he was able to arrest him. He had to do all sorts of things. So it took nearly a decade. Because you remember, and then we didn't. I want to talk about, we're going to zoom into another episode and talk about Pope Boniface, who basically got murdered and killed by the Nogre, and how sad his death was beyond that, and how even corrupt the Italian families were that had a lot of control in Italy, and tried to push a lot of fingers in the papacy. And Boniface was kind of your man's man in your face, kind of, the ear of God and doing things for Christendom, and making Christendom great again type of thing. And that was not appreciated amongst autocrats like Philip the Fair and others. And we forget that Boniface, one of the first things he did is excommunicate Philip the Fair, because Philip the Fair. Here's the other thing that's not taught. Philip the Fair started taxing churches. This is in the late 1200s, like 1290s. He started taxing the churches, and that's the reason why he got excommunicated. He was trying to get money from the churches where normally churches were exempt. And so that's where the friction already came between Philip the Fair, because he was going bankrupt for all his wars and all the battles he was doing, and he owed the Templars loads of money, and he was kind of desperate, and so he started to take money from the church, and that started to cause a lot of bad blood there. So there's a lot of history to kind of talk about Boniface and the rise of Boniface and who he was and how he got to where he got to, and his unfortunate fall when he was attacked, which was unthinkable. And this Philip the Fair, this psychotic nutcase, who not only killed the Pope but installed a new Pope, who never actually left France or never actually went, was elected in down south in the papacy in the Vatican, in Rome, and how this whole thing was a massive schism that's still reverberating today. And the magnanimous Order of Knights Templar, how this tragedy befell on something that was essentially so pure and good in terms of their virtues and their extremely rigid code. Their code was very rigid, very militaristic, but you know what? It gave men in that era a sense of purpose. It gave those men a sense of purpose and a sense of closeness to their God, and to be able to fight for their God and claim that holy place where Jesus walked, claim the place where it all started for this particular religion, which is Christianity that we're talking about. So this whole thing was a huge thing for the average Christian person back then, and for the average Christian soldier or warrior, and especially a Knights Templar, and especially for the clergy. And so, what questions do you have? I mean, I've gone through quite a few numbers. I've made a few statements and facts, and going into bits and parts of things. What are your thoughts?
I think you did a pretty good job explaining this part. Every door, you're cracking a door and you see through and you just think, man, that's opening a bunch more. And it just looks like it could be a never-ending discussion.
Yeah, we're in some great territory. As I say, I go through this in lectures that I do every year. They're long lectures. They're 2 hours. They're all backed by lots of evidence and lots of facts. And we don't have enough time to go through all this in every episode. But I really want to start setting the scene in these past couple of episodes. And to really give the Knights Templar justice, it's really like a 30 to 4 hour talk of going through everything bit by bit. And
these guys had to be very disciplined, because even you have to imagine, even in the order itself, there had to be people that wanted to go in and rescue De Molay. There had to be groups that wanted to say, no, let's go in and get him.
Oh,
and of course
absolutely.
They didn't.
Absolutely.
But there had to be guys that wanted to go in, and because that was a very powerful group.
Well, imagine just imagine this, and let's end on this, because this is how profound it is. These guys, these men, these holy men, these godly men of Christ, of this particular religion, were called heretics, sodomites, devil worshippers, prayed to Baphomet, which is a corruption of the word Baal, which has got nothing to do with Baphomet, and that's about the Phoenician gods, and that's a whole different other rap that I can go into at a later date, and I will go into that. And other types of heresies as well, to then be absolved. Normally you don't get absolved, but once you're damned like that, kind of like you're like, oh geez, oh god. And if it's proven, guess what? You're all dead. You're all dead. You're dead. Biggest scandal ever. Biggest heresy ever if it was all true. But Clement absolved them because it was all BS. The interrogations didn't match up. It was all over the place. It was all lies. As soon as the Templars were tortured, or were not tortured, they recounted it all. It wasn't true. And the fact that they touched so many lives in Europe, and there were the sergeants involved as well. To say the sergeants didn't see anything, and all these noble knights didn't see anything. See, if you want to darken and plagiarize and falsify, it's very convenient to say, oh, there was only 1,000 Knights Templars at any time. Yeah. They were a shadowy, secret organization, and there was only a few of them. And maybe there wasn't 1,000 at the time. It was only 500. And these 500 secret knights had the knowledge of a lost civilization, and they only knew these secret rituals and all this. No, I mean, that's a perfect setup. A perfect setup to start blasting all this heresy where the actual real facts are actually more mundane, more realistic, more human to actually what was and what is the medieval life, and how organizations were very labor intensive to do what they had to do back then. There was no automation. I mean, I had conversations with some very expert, other experts on this field, and then it's just like I had to remind them, like, well, hold on a second, you're talking like if there was just one preceptor in that chapter and that was it, you're talking, oh, well, yeah, they were very efficient. Like, well, how are they efficient? Because the whole thing is super labor intensive. Are you talking about Superman here, who was able to do all that, or and then hold on a second, how many did the preceptor lead in the battle group? Oh, they led about 5 to 10 knights. Actually, 10 knights. Okay, well, where are these 10 knights? I mean, if there was just 1,000 preceptors in Europe and that was it, where were the 10 knights for each of these preceptors to lead? Yeah. Right? So that's where everything starts to,
unravel.
Yeah. You were starting to unravel the truth by looking at economics. So the gifts that we have is, I'm looking at this from an economic perspective. I'm looking at this from a mathematical, logistical perspective of what was more real then. And we've got loads of data of how other organizations did similar things and the manpower it took to do those things. And we're not talking about supermen that can carry all this kind of stuff. And they didn't have cars or trucks or, big, massive, aircraft carriers. And then when we compare them to like, oh yeah, but they were like the SAS and Delta Force. All right, in those times, in terms of their fighting ability, the Knights at least, not so much in Templar Knights, but Knights at least, they were type of the SAS. But remember, they weren't recruiting within a military organization like the SAS or the Delta Force and the SAS. They recruit from the best of the best within the military.
Right.
The Templars were recruiting from the populace, and they were subcategorized. Knights would be from the noble class. Templars would be from the other classes. Some merchant guilds and merchant lords or whatever who weren't really nobility kind of slipped through into the Knights Templars. Not a lot. A lot of them became sergeants or whatever. But my point being is they had actually a bigger pool of selection compared to the Delta Forces and SASs of today, which are, and we're talking about professional armies funded by, it's different balls. So it's really interesting. So sometimes we, even us historians, sometimes we forget the realm we are today, and we analyze things. Although we try our best, we analyze things as we are still today, and we forget what life was like. And you need to bring all of that and have a macro and micro understanding of the economies, of the demographics, of the population, of the stratosphere, of what a noble house family was like, how many kids they would have, which was enormous families. Same thing with the peasantry. Getting good estimates of the population of that time, and then a good estimate of how many 18-year-olds were available from that pool. Also understanding that you're in the climate of a very religious society in comparison today. Even if you go back 60 years in like America or in England was a far more religious society 60 years ago, but not even to the level of the medieval times. So, for example, when I was growing up, there was no big stores open on Sundays. Sundays was a day of prayer. It was everything shut down on Sunday except for church and maybe one little convenience shop or whatever. Maybe. Even
gas stations
and
was closed.
Even gas stations, even in your lifetime, my lifetime. So even in my lifetime, it's just in the past, post 2000s, are we used to having things open late night on a Sunday night. And when you get to major cities like in London, other places, 24-hour service. This is a new phenomenon. in Christian Europe and in Christian England, when there were proper Christian countries back then, more so than today, and in my lifetime, TV was bloody boring on Sundays. I was looking forward to cartoons, and it was all church stuff. It was all church stuff and all church choir. We didn't have as many channels as you Americans had, but it was all church stuff, and I used to hate it.
It wasn't that good over here either.
Okay. So I was jealous of the Japanese and all the awesome anime stuff, but. My point being is that even in our lifetime, you and me growing up, we've seen a difference when we were kids, that Sundays were holy days and things, and even on the weekdays, things used to shut not relatively early, not like late night like they are now. Oh, we're open till 10 p.m. We're open till 11 p.m. Even back then, things would close 7 o'clock, sometimes 8 o'clock, and the hours got longer and longer and longer. So think about Christendom when you guys, if you're in your 40s to 50s and you lived in England, or you're listening in England or France, or not France, maybe France, but in America or whatever, or Spain, think about how religious it was back then compared to today in your lifetime. Then go back 50 years before you're born, where it was even more rigorous with Christendom religious. Now transport yourself back to the 1100s to 1300s. I mean, religion was to a level that you and me cannot understand. Like today when you wake up, if you're like a war gamer like me, there are many people amongst my ranks as fellow war gamers, when they wake up and they brush their teeth, they're thinking about that tabletop war game in their army list. When they're having a shower, they're thinking about their army and how they're going to play. This is true, whether it's a game or football fans or sports fans or someone into something, into a particular thing or into a particular hobby. They're completely obsessed about it. It takes over a good portion of their lives, right? Think about that, but Christendom, Christ in your life, the church being the place you would go not only for worship, but for information, for news, for guidance, for leadership. And then you had this monastic warrior monk, best of the best, who were loved because they were humble. If you look at the Knights Templar rules, you may not have any ornate helmets. This is the reason why they had a lot of their helmets were flat tops and they weren't decorative. They weren't allowed to have decorative swords, swords that were brutal and did the job and slayed. Nothing that was all ornamented and had fancy little things. This was a very humble order, in terms of how many sets of uniforms they had. This was all about killing the infidels, training, dying for God, never running away from battle. And if you're not doing that, go farm the land, go work, go do something for the order to sustain the order. So you had some of the most highly efficient, productive members of societies living an extremely stringent lifestyle, but in the service of God. And so my point is, Billy, is that we need to time warp ourselves into that realm. I'm hoping I'm taking you into that realm of the medieval times, where you can understand that they are living a life that's completely alien to us. To marry someone to sleep with someone out of wedlock was heresy. To marry someone who wasn't a virgin you're damned. All of these things that we now take for granted, that they took very, very seriously. We live in a completely different world. I mean, a lot of us are thankful for it. Some of us want to be back in those types of that era. Preferably, I like living here, man. I like being in a house where it's minus 16 degrees outside, and I'm not freezing, and I'm playing Warhammer Total, or I'm talking to you over the microphone. We're doing interviews. Life is good, man, but we have to be appreciative of this. But back then, dark time in the world, and there was some light. All over in different parts of the world and different types of religions, but there was light, and keeping the monsters and tyrants and dictators at bay was a tough thing to do when might was right back then. But this is another, hopefully, eye-opener for all you guys into the organization of the Knights Templars. And we've gone for the myth busting, we've gone for the Cistercian Order and the close links that they had with the Cistercian Order and how they were built upon a lot of the Cistercian principles. We're now going to go into some of the battles in the future to show you how epic these guys were. And then we're going to go into some more things and uncover a lot more truths and blow your minds away. Any thoughts and last words, Billy, that you want to add on to this?
No, but stay tuned. Before we got more of the Templar stuff, which is very interesting, we've also got some very heavy hitters in the worlds of Masonry coming up that we should get to before that. So stay tuned. We got some pretty big things coming up even before Christmas. So stick with us, and Godspeed.
Thank you for listening to On the Level Podcast, your Masonic podcast. When you are ready, duly and truly prepared, you can always knock on the door.